Be a millionaire in all the 6 aspects of health. We share tips to improve your physical, mental, intellectual, social, spiritual, and financial health. Today, we are focusing on mental health and metaphor. So, if you've never seen Millionaires Are Made, this is the show where we all have the fundamental belief that every person you meet knows something that you don't, and there's something to be learned from everybody. So, in the spirit of authenticity, we don't talk about tips or advice before the show starts. We keep it real, no bias, no persuasion, just 3 awesome people sharing from their life journey. I don't know who these guests are until 15 minutes before, with one exception who's been on our show before. So, let's just jump right in and bring them on here with our first guest, Jesse, who is also one of our sponsors.
Welcome.
Jesse.
So I think I've been on here 6 times, so it's getting a little redundant, but it works. Let's talk about metaphor. What's the question? I completely forget how to do this.
No, yeah. Well, first of all, for those who haven't seen the show, introduce yourself a little bit and just tell us a little bit about who you are.
I'm Jesse Lewis. I perform comedy hypnosis shows across Canada, and I also help entertainers to actually hit 6 figures. And it's pretty much about serving people. That's all you really need to know to hit 6 figures, and serve them in a way that has 0 ego. I know I'm a piece of crap. Can you admit you are too? And then we can move forward and not be pieces of crap.
Yeah, awesome. So, our topic today is mental health and metaphor, and I mean, even your moniker here, the living metaphor. What would be your tip about kind of mental health and metaphor, and how somebody can use that to advantage their life?
Well, metaphors everywhere, right? Things like my mental computer is running low, or I've got depression and it feels like a storm all around me. Those are similes, but realistically, they're metaphors. And through the stories that we tell ourselves, that is what happens with our mental health. If we say we're a piece of crap all the time, we're obviously going to feel like a piece of crap and behave like a piece of crap. And hey, Luna. And if we change the stories we're telling ourselves, if we change the stories, the metaphors that we're telling ourselves, it begins to change our mental mindset, and it changes absolutely everything. So that's how it's all really connected. So, yeah. For
how'd
me
you learn
personally,
this?
So I've been doing hypnosis for years and years and years. And one of the ways to do hypnosis is you do a lot of metaphor. For instance, I often use a story of a bird emerging from an egg, which, while I have people in hypnosis, it's basically giving them a rebirth that isn't their own rebirth. And then you go through the life cycle of that bird, spreading its wings, having a little bit of problems first, can't fly to start with, and then eventually it flies away. So using that, it allows people to have a rebirth in their mind, and it allows that metaphor for them to spread their wings and give themselves permission to do things. I learned it all through hypnotherapy and through hypnosis, and it's a wonderful thing. So, not much comedy here today.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty heavy one for sure. Rebirth
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
retooling yourself is not
And
exactly
that's a metaphor right there. Retooling yourself. That is a metaphor.
for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but as you said, it's not exactly a comedy topic most of the time.
No.
It feels pretty heavy. So I'm glad you can kind of, bring some weight into bear on that, and maybe even lighten some of that load here. So, hey man, we really appreciate you and being on the show today, and just killing it. I'm going to bring on one of our other guests here to talk about what they feel about metaphor. So we'll bring you back on here at the end.
We're good.
So our next guest is Jeremy.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever this finds you.
Yeah, Jeremy, how are you today?
I am doing amazing. Got a workout in. It is 70-something degrees in southern Florida, so life does not suck.
Yeah, we've got half a foot of snow on the ground here in Arkansas, so I'm a little jealous.
40 years of Ohio winters, so I paid my dues. That's how I feel.
Well, tell us who you are. What brings you on the show?
So I am Jeremy. My internet brings me on the show, but I'm Jeremy Roadruck. I'm a business coach, consultant. I help men to tool. Basically, life is too short for bad food, bad marriages, and bad business. And so I help men 40 plus to master the marriage, master the business, to make it something they enjoy and leave a legacy that they're proud of, and that they know they've done their job here and left the world a better place than they found it.
Awesome. And what's your tip in regards to mental health and metaphor for our audience today?
So basically I have two parts. Number one is, let's just say mental health, mental illness, let's just say that is a metaphor, and it's actually a false dichotomy. Because when you say mental health, mental illness, it unconsciously creates a teeter-totter, right? Either you're mentally healthy or you're mentally ill. There's no in between. It's one or the other. And I'm like, nerf that, because that tends to push people to extremes. What if it's really just about mental process? Meaning we have a way to get to the things that we think and the things we feel and the way we behave. And if we look at it as a way to get there, whether it's biological, whether it is, cognitive, we can begin to unpack it and work it backwards. And so then from that place of mental process, it all becomes BS, belief systems, right? Our stories reveal our BS. But if we're listening, we get that awareness, we can start to make new choices. And an easy example is, someone will say, I'm angry. And it's like, cool, that's an identity statement. I am angry, not disappointed, not hurt, not confused, not flummoxed, not bewitched, bewixt. There's so many other terms we could use, but nope, I am angry. Cool. Are you angry, or are you feeling angry? Which is a different metaphor. Because now I say I'm feeling angry, feelings can change, feelings can shift. But what are you feeling angry about? I am feeling angry about context. Oh, well, once we begin to start unraveling that language pattern, we can start to begin to identify what's really going on, rather than just default to, I am angry. My answer to everything is a hammer, and now I shall smash the world. Oh, you're just feeling angry. Yeah, you're totally allowed. I mean, what happened? Oh, this and this and this. Dude, I'd be angry about that too. That's not fair. So what can we do about it? How can we change it? How can we affect the cause? But then what can we do with this emotion? Because what if you're not really angry? What if you're really passionate and your passion is being blocked? And you know to call that anger, but maybe it's a different word. Let's get a thesaurus and explore. And so that's where we start to recover our power. With awareness, we can make new choices. But as long as we're not aware, we're stuck in these identity statements. I am XYZ. How much control, how much power, how much impact can you make when you're stuck in a cycle? Versus you can step back and look at the cycle and go, oh, right? Part of my life as a martial artist, the reason you get hit is because you were open. It's not about what they did right. It's about what you did wrong. It's about the opening that you left. That's why they hit you. So if we close the openings, they can't hit you. They got to get more creative. And every time they hit you, you're still alive. Cool. Close the opening. So if your wife is yelling at you, your kids are yelling at you, if anybody, anything, it's like, cool, that's fantastic feedback. And let's talk about boundaries. Let's talk about, there's so many things we can play in that space, but let's just start with, it's a process. And there is no failure. There's just feedback. So what's life giving you right now? Let's make changes. Life has given you lemons. You could make lemonade, or you could make whiskey sours. Which one's more fun?
Man, what a phenomenal wealth of advice here. Even one of our listeners commented, "Genius guy," and I'd have to agree. Tell me though, what's the story behind how you obtained that wisdom, or how you come across that?
I had some bad stuff happen at 5 and 6 that threw me into an existential quagmire. Why are we here? What's our fate? What's our purpose? People say one thing, they mean a second thing, they do a third thing, and I can't trust adults and I can't trust kids. So now I've got my back against the wall and I've got to figure it all out on my own. And so I began doing a lot of deep research into, cross-cultural religious studies, metaphysics, Buddhism, Taoism, ontology, epistemology. And this was before the internet. So I had to like go to the dictionary and actually look stuff up in the encyclopedias. And then the real thing that drove all of this to the healthy side was I started in martial arts back in '95, and you got a room full of people that can just beat the crap out of you. Your ego and your intellectual whatever does not matter when you've got people that can just wipe the walls with you. And yeah, you can posture all you want. Oosh! That's a hard dose of reality, but their heart was in the right place. And so that's what cracked my ego open to say, okay, numbnut, you think you're so smart. And so that's what brought my mind, my body, my emotions back into integration. And I started working really well with the problem kids because I recognize that energy. I know that feeling of worthlessness and that feeling of not being able to trust anyone. You're cool. It's fine. You are where you are, dude. Where do you want to be? Like, I'm not here to tell you what to do, but if there was an easier way to get where you want to go, would you be curious?
Yeah, everybody can.
But let's have that
Everybody can
conversation.
posture until you get punched in the face, right?
Or swept or kicked or choked, or you got somebody sitting on you, or they
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you're all well. You got
well,
but
well,
go.
awesome. I'll be excited to hear more about that and kind of our round robin when we bring everybody on here. Thanks so much for your tip. We'll bring you back on. I want to get to our third and final guest, Matthew.
Hello.
Matthew, how goes it today, man?
Good. It's good to be here. This is cool.
Good. Well, tell our audience a little bit about, who are you, Matthew?
Hold on, it says my name is Hugh, which is great because it's my Facebook name. It's how I keep like clients from finding me. So my name is Matthew. I just love that it says Hugh right there. Okay, I'll introduce myself. I'm Matthew Lowe. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I work with outpatient adults at a private practice. I do what I call existential cognitive linguistic therapy. It's a very fancy way of saying that I help my clients get clarity by introducing them to concepts and vocabulary, things from what I've studied, psychology, philosophy, and religion. I just published my book. I'm going to wave it at the screen now. Seeing the Forest and the Trees. It's a compilation of the insights I've been sharing with clients for the last decade or so. In it, I teach my readers how to understand themselves better through their words, their limitations, emotions, time, relationships, and even how to get the most out of therapy.
Yeah. And hey, for all the guys, everybody in the audience there's a link in the comments here to go purchase the book. So go hit that buy button, get on your Amazon, take out a second mortgage on your home, whatever you got to do to get the book.
It's cheaper than that.
So, okay. So tell us though, what is your tip as regard to mental health and metaphor specifically?
Sure. So I'm encouraging people to learn how to use metaphors to better understand their situations, their problems, and to imagine new solutions. I'll say a little more about that. It can be really intense to think directly about our challenges in life. We get flooded with emotion. We're so focused on what's wrong that we can't think outside the box to find solutions. And this is where metaphors come in, right? By comparing a situation to something else, it takes some of the load off, right? We're thinking about something fictional, something a little less intense than our immediate situation. And what we do then is solve the metaphorical situation instead and apply it to our own. So I'll give you my favorite example. Clients will, fairly often complain to me about their anxiety. And they'll talk about having like waves of anxiety, right? Anxious emotions and sensations, they rise up, they get flooded, they get overwhelmed. And I point out, right, how waves of anxiety, it's a metaphor. So let's talk about waves instead, right? What do you do at the beach when an actual wave is coming at you, right? How do you handle those waves? People give me different answers. You can leap over it, let yourself get knocked down, run away. My personal favorite is I dive straight into the wave. I love that feeling of it sort of pulsing through you. If whatever the solution is, I help them then translate that metaphorical solution back to the actual experience of anxiety, right? So let it knock you over might be, you know what? I'm going to be anxious. Let me just sort of ride this out, right? One client I loved it said she stands sideways so that it hits her like this, but her back foot is already planted. And I love that, right? If we think about applying that to actual anxiety, it's just very neat. You can see I'm excited by the topic.
Yeah, no, that's pretty phenomenal. I very much appreciate how you've put metaphor into application. Obviously, like our other guests, you have a ton of wealth of experience here. Tell me though, like, and for our audience, how'd you come across this information? Like, where did this tip come from in your story?
Sure. No, I appreciate it. So this is kind of like a second career for me, being a therapist. Before realizing I wanted to be one, I studied a lot of theology, both in college and in my first time at grad school. At that time, I was very religious. Now I'm very secular. But I got heavily into metaphors in divinity school. At the time, I was like in the process of losing my faith, specifically my faith that any description of God could be absolute. But weirdly, it turned out a lot of theologians agreed with me, right? That God is just too big to talk about accurately with human language, right? The best people do is talk about God through metaphors, right? God's a shepherd, a rock, a king, light, etc. Right? And no image is the full truth, but that's the whole point, right? You keep coming up with more images, each of which reveals some dimension of God. So when I became a therapist, I found that metaphors worked equally well in order to translate things that felt too big for us, right? Big emotions or just like big words like love or death, right? We take them by using metaphor, we translate them into something more relatable. And in that way, we can figure out what to do with them.
Yeah, the only way to eat the elephant is one bite at a time, right?
That is a solid metaphor right there. And what's fun too, right, is you take it and you start like analyzing, right? So we would have to think, okay, but we're going to have to cook this thing first. What does it look like to process a large thing and then turn it into bite-sized pieces?
Yep.
So anyhow, it's too much fun.
No, I think
Jeremy,
that's fascinating.
yeah, Jeremy, I appreciate your quote. I got that book on the back on the wall somewhere over here.
Yeah, well, speaking of Jeremy, let's bring Jeremy and Jesse back on and kind of talk about this. There's a couple things that I think that everybody has really touched on here, especially where in your story your tip has came from, and I want to just point out that it seems like we've all studied a pretty good deal of theology to get to where we are. So, you know, I'd like to open it up, and Matthew, you in particular, since you went to divinity school, and just say, like, you know, what about theology do you think brought you to mental health, or vice versa?
Right? Because I didn't see it coming. About 5 years before I like went to grad school to be a therapist, my mother was like, I think you probably want to be a therapist. And I laughed at her. I was like, that's crazy. You don't, there's no better way. Like I love feeling self-important, and philosophy and theology are these very self-important topics, right? We're talking about the biggest things possible. So this is an important topic and I'm facilitating it. And so I think when I had sort of found my way sort of outside of faith, I think I was still looking for what would feel like to me the most important conversations that I could be having that I'm like well prepared to have. So I think just what matters most, was what led me from one thing to the other.
Yeah, Jeremy, do you have some insight then? Is what you had mentioned kind of some theology and stuff in your story.
Yeah, so I went big into Buddhism, Taoism. If you look at pretty much all, Asian metaphysics, it's all metaphor, right? And you look at Jungian psychology and the archetypes and archetype integration, the journey of a boy to a man to a king when you're talking to someone who's not a king, that's all metaphor. And it's the idea of evolution of best self. And then in martial arts, black belt excellence and beyond, which is mastery. Telling 9-year-olds about black belt excellence, what does it mean to be a black belt? We're tapping into that hero archetype. And if you were a black belt, how would you behave? Would mom and dad have to remind you to do your chores, or would you do it first? Well, I do it first. Okay, cool. How do we answer when self-control? Is that a yes or no, sir? That accountability. So like running those pieces, it's all metaphor. Like everything that we create outside of our actual experience in the moment, because like our conscious mind runs 20 to 137 bits of data a second. The unconscious is 2 million to 11 million. So everything is deleted, distorted, generalized literally every single second. If everything was experience based, we got to hang out for 10 years, then go So that was a decade. And now society would collapse. We wouldn't accomplish anything. And so, like, everything that we're learning, you begin to see these allegories and these metaphors and go, well, if I could do this on a small scale, then it begins to hit on a larger scale. And so when we look at like spiritual traditions, you're looking at lifetimes of experience collapse down, like especially in the Buddhist canon. The story is it's all Buddha said this stuff and his brother Ananda heard it, which is there's always a subjective filter. Thus I have heard is the start of all the sutras. That way you can never say, well, Buddha said. No. Ananda is quoting the Buddha as having said. So there's always a little legalistic slip. But people would have these experiences, these flashes of enlightenment, and go, how did that happen? And reverse engineer the process and write it down. And that became a sutra, and that became a school of thought for people to follow. So like in the Buddhist canon, there's 84,000 ways to be enlightened, which is a Chinese metaphor for infinite. Or they'll say 10,000 things, which is another Chinese metaphor for infinite. Or if you've read Watership Down's rabbits count 1, 2, 3, 4, more than 4. Any number greater than 4 is more than 4. These are wonderful ways to just kind of cut through a lot of the little bits that people get hung up on. I think, Matthew's book, his title is perfect. I could see the forest if you just got those damn trees out of the way. Yeah. And a lot of spiritual traditions, when you have that wisdom component, you have this guide that's going to, with compassion, metaphorically or literally, smack you in the head and say, shut up, boy, look at what's in front of your face. And we need those experiences. And I'm fortunate to be in a 1,500-year tradition through Chinese martial arts, plus all these other experiences that it's the coolest thing to start to realize, like, we can see the matrix, we're plugged into it, but we can also shift it, which is another metaphor.
Yeah,
absolutely. They're everywhere. All like our language. Jeremy, you were talking about like grab a thesaurus. The amount of time, like even in the book, I tell people like go to etymology online, right, and look up the word overwhelm has a basis in like being at sea, right? It's about a thing being sort of overturned and submerged, right? And overwhelm was a metaphor. Oh, I'll respond. Nanu, is that? Sorry, I'm pronouncing your name. It's called Seeing the Forest and the Trees. Oh, what's it about? It's basically the things I've been saying to clients for the last 10 years or so of my work. A lot of reframes. What if we think about it this way? What if we see how this word, right? I have a whole chapter where, not a chapter, like a section about the word acceptance being a word that I don't find helpful, despite being a therapist, and therapists love that word. So it's a lot of things like that. It's a lot of like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, kind of, bits.
Well, and we had another question that jumped in here too that I want to address, because I think this is pretty important and a big part of why we're all here and do what we do too, is if someone listening is struggling with their mental health, what metaphor might help them feel, more hopeful or more understood to those around them? And Jesse, I want to kind of start with you and get your insight.
Every night the sun goes down, but every morning the sun comes up. We only have one day. That's all we actually have is right now. There is no point worrying about it. It's gone. So the only thing you can do is move forward. It sounds weird. I've been in some really crappy situations. I was homeless for 2 years. And the only thing that got me through that was waking up every morning, walking outside, and watching the sunrise come up. So no matter where I'm going to cry, but no matter where you are, there's hope. There is hope. And that was 5 years ago. I now own 2 homes. I'm happily married. Well, happily with someone. I call it marriage. So there's always hope. Sorry for going off.
Jeremy,
no, you're fine.
Jeremy shared something earlier that I want to echo, to answer the question here. Jeremy, you were talking about sort of mental illness versus mental process. And I love that, right? To me, sort of overarchingly, if we can treat things as ongoing things rather than set in stone, I think for ones to feel hopeful is to feel like I'm in the middle of a story and I'm working it out, right? As opposed to I have a condition and it's a rock and it just sits on me. So Jeremy, I think that was just like a really powerful kind of like core metaphor of process over thing.
Beautiful. I'm glad that landed for you. Nanu, I would say a big thing for metaphor, we are not human beings. We are human becomings. We are once in a lifetime experiences from the dawn of time to the end of creation. Even if we had an exact genetic twin, our lived experience is unique to us. And that can sound like, well, a lot of pressure, but here, level of artistry is just creativity. It's throw paint up and see what sticks. And then what do you do with it and how do you adjust it? You're alive. And as long as you're still alive, what's the reason I'm alive? Part of it is for you to go play and discover and figure out. So, what if that light at the end of the tunnel, it's not an oncoming train? What if it was a bigger, brighter, more expansive future, but you've got to walk the steps to get there? And the cool part is you did something really important. You asked a question, which makes you open and allows other things to come in and old things to go away. So, we are a waveform and you only are stuck if you decide that you are stuck. So you go, what's good about this? Nothing. Okay, well, what could be good about this? What else could it mean? What else could it mean? You keep digging and try to come up with like 10, 15, 20, 30 different interpretations, right? I had a client, she had a horrible way that she grew up. And I was like, cool, well, you got to come up with like 20 things about yourself that are positive. Well, I can't do that. Oh, fantastic. So it needs to be 30. Well, there's no way I can get to 30. So now it's 40, right? You're alive and you're in your 70s. So I know there's good stuff in you. So don't give me this BS, this belief system of diminishment. There's something more. We're at 40. You want to go for 50. And she said, no, I'm good. A week later, she came back. She had 75 things good about herself. So what's wrong is available. What's right is too, but we got to ask the correct questions to get there. What's wrong with me? We'll give you an answer. What can I learn? How can I grow? We'll give you a completely different set of answers. So that's what I would say is, and I love the metaphor of the show must go on. Exactly right.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to jump in. That's the one I kind of live by, being in the entertainment industry. Is, the show must go on is a big deal, right? You've got 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people waiting on you to do your thing, right? It doesn't matter if you've got all the lights don't work, or the sound isn't right, or your voice is feeling a little harsh that day, or your guitar isn't tuned, or whatever the case may be. You just got to make it happen, man. And so I think that's a lot of what life is just making it happen. Well, really appreciate all you guys coming on. Jesse, you've been on the show a bunch here, and we always do a daily challenge here to help our audience with, something that they can do to apply what we've talked about here today. So as far as mental health and metaphor, who's got a suggestion of a small, simple thing that we can do every day to benefit ourselves in regards to mental health and metaphor?
Okay, so because we brought religion into this, I'm thinking about the metaphor one step at a time. Maybe the simple exercise is figuring out the next step and then actually implementing it specifically for mental health. Because until you take the first step, you can't take the second step. So that's all I
like it. I like it. So figure out the next step.
Mm-hmm.
There's an American proverb, which isn't that well known anymore, but it does no good to jump a 20-foot gap into 10-foot leaps.
It's a great line.
So you really got to think about that next step. Exactly right. It's like, what is the most reasonable thing? Well, I can only jump 10 feet. Well, I'm going to jump 10 feet. It's a 20-foot hold, numbnut. Oh, crap. So use your resources and use your references. With social media, you're only as alone as you choose to be. Right here in the US, you can call 988 and get emotional and mental support, free, anonymous, safe, 24/7, no cost. 911 emergencies for physical, 988 for emergencies, mental and emotional. And there is no weakness asking for help. True strength is the ability to let go of the struggle and ask for help. That's real strength. And so that is a powerful metaphor. People think holding on makes them strong. Sometimes what makes you strong is letting go.
Yeah, I feel that for sure. Well, thank you guys for all being on the show. I also want to thank our sponsors, Jesse, Sarah Mag Jones, Chris Skrovsky, Samir Dasani. All you guys have been awesome. You guys are what really makes this show happen, along with our beautiful audience. So millionaires are made, and you can be one.